Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. So, brothers, this is our second lesson. So what we'll first do is just give a very quick reminder, revision of what we did in the first lesson, and then we'll move on to the new subject material today. So last week we talked about the concept of the Arabic language and we mapped it out. And we talked about a few stages in that. The first being the root or the base letters, and those root base letters are based upon what? Can anyone remember?
Based upon what?
What letters?
Sin, mean,
So yeah, any three letters.
Any three letters. It could be any three letters. It's not just
That's
we
right.
just picked few.
Out of 29.
Out of 29 letters in the Arabic language, there are basically the root or the base letters are any three. That's right. Not that necessarily, not that every combination is used in Arabic language, but a lot are. Okay. So salama, kataba, rasala. These are all different letters combined to have a specific meaning, which we call the root or the base. Okay. And from the root to the base, we then get patterns, okay? So like if we look at sajada, which means to prostrate, then you have a pattern like masjid or sajid, the one who prostrates, okay? Or Islam, salama, Muslim, salim, yeah? So these are all patterns based on those three letters, okay? Root letters. And then the next stage that we talked about was the actual combination of words together. Okay? And what we understood there was that we gave the example of Amr, Zaid hitting Amr. And we said that in the English, you can only do it one way. You have to say Zaid first, you have to have the verb second, hit, and then Amr, the object. And we realized that in Urdu, you can have a combination because you add in Zaid ne, Amr ko, Mara, yeah? But you can say Mara, Zaid ne, Amr ko, yeah? So you can mix it around because you've got the ne and ko together attached to the subject and object. In Arabic, you can do exactly the same, but instead of having to use 5 words, as in Urdu, because you have ne and ko as the extra 2 on top of the 3, in Arabic you only need just the 3, and it's all on the endings of the verb. Okay, so that's what we are answering. So the way it would be daraba zaydun amran. Yeah, so it's about the difference of the end, and we'll go into a little bit more elaboration on that, but just to appreciate that it's all about the endings which determine where the subject and object is. Okay, so there are patterns, yeah? Combination of words, and then the way that actually comes out. So if we chose to say Amrun Zaydun Daraba, which means like Amruko Zaydne Mara, okay, then that's a method of expression. Why did we use the object first, not the subject first? That's the way we linguistically express, and that's called balagha in Arabic, yeah? Why is it done in certain combinations, yeah? So that's called a method of expression. Okay, so that was balagha. The combination of words together we called nahu. Okay, in Arabic the science is nahu. And then the patterns of the words and the science behind that is sarf. And then the root base, which is of the 3 letters, is the lugha. Okay? And that is what you find in the dictionary. So you look up the lugha in the dictionary for the 3 letters to tell you that sense of what it means. The patterns is the science, is the sarf. So in one way, if you have, for example, Muslim, we all know what Muslim is, but or let's say masjid, and somebody who's non-Arab wants to find out, how do I find out what does masjid mean? When he goes into the dictionary, he doesn't look under mean. He has to look under sajada, which are the root bases, sin and jim and dal. Yeah? So, but the only way of knowing that is when you understand how the patterns are formed. So you have to have the understanding of sarf yeah, the signs of sad, so that you know that masjid actually converts into its root, which is sajada. And that's what a lot of the lessons we will do, is to be able to have this expertise in converting from patterns back to the root letters, so that we can then pick up the dictionary and find out what it means. Okay, so that was the basic sciences, and then we did the map of the Arabic language, yeah, and we call that laws. Okay, and we divided it into muhmal and mawdu, yeah, and it was the mawdu that we were interested in. So the mawdu is the meaningful and the muhmal is the non-meaningful. What that basically means is that when you make a noise, okay, that would be muhmal. Hello would be mawdu. It means something. It has a meaningful sound to it. Yeah, it means something. That's mawdu. So obviously we're interested in the mawdu. Yeah, and we understood in Arabic language in the mawdu there are 3 types. There's the kalima, yeah, which was of 3 types, and then the murakkab, yeah, and that was a murakkab means combination of words. And those combination of words can be غير مفيد or mufid or jumla. Okay, so the idea here is that غير مفيد is a phrase, and jumla or mufid, murakkab mufid is a sentence. The idea here is that mufid means benefit. Yeah? So what it's basically saying is that when you put 2 words together, it may have without benefit or with benefit. And I'll give you an example. So if you say in the garden, it's a phrase. It's not actually a full sentence because you're wondering what is in the garden. So if I then say I am in the garden, that becomes mufid. A full sentence. I am in the garden. Okay? Or if I said a tall boy, it's a phrase. It's not a sentence. A tall boy is a phrase. But if I said a tall boy met me, that becomes the sentence. That becomes the jumla. Okay? So that's how it's split in the Arabic language. And so the ghayr mufid, or the phrases, are of 15 types. Okay, and we'll go through each one through the lessons, yeah. And the jumla are of 2 types. Okay, so that's really the breakdown of the Arabic language in terms of maps. So we've got kalima, we've got murakkab, ghayr mufid, which are the phrases, and the murakkab mufid, the jumla, which are of 2 types. And then we progress on to actually understand what are those 3 types of kalima. For example, let's start with that. And we touched upon that last week. Can anyone remember what they were?
Noun, ism.
Yeah.
Ism, fi'l, and harf. Ism, fi'l.
Yeah. Ism, fi'l,
Harf.
and harf. Yes. Good. So ism. So what are isms?
Noun. So
they can be nouns.
Yeah.
adjective,
They can be adjectives.
adverb,
They can be adverbs.
and pronoun.
Pronoun. MashaAllah, this is really good. Yes, excellent. Mumtaz meaning excellent. So now we needed a bit of a grammatical definition just to help us. So a noun is basically what?
Solid thing, anything.
An entity, which can be a thing, a person, or a place. So a thing could be an animal, a person is a human being, a police officer, a doctor, lawyer, okay, or a place, London, or the masjid, yeah? So these are places, so these are nouns, okay? And then, what are pronouns?
So, the quality. We describe the noun like.
Yes, so they're the abbreviations of the noun. So the policeman came to me, then he, i.e. the policeman. So he is a pronoun, Okay, or I talked to the policeman. Then you could say as a pronoun, I talked to him. So him is a pronoun. Okay, so they replace, abbreviate the noun. Okay, so that's that. What are the adjectives?
Which describes.
Describes the noun. The tall boy, as an example. And what are the adverbs?
Very tall.
Sporting,
Very tall, something like that.
So they basically describe the. As an example, you're correct. So what do they describe? They can describe. They can,
Condition or word. Specify the word.
so an adverb describes or modifies the verb. Adverb, verb. So a verb is hitting. Hitting hard would be the adverb.
Adverb.
So hitting the verb and hard or violently would be the adverb. Okay, so that's one way. Or it can also describe the adjective. So tall boy becomes very tall boy. So very would be the adverb, tall would be the adjective, and boy would be the noun. So the adverb can describe either the verb or the adjective. Okay, so it's good to just get that basic idea, because then what we're going to do is actually convert all these in later lessons into the Arabic definitions. So if we're stuck on the English side, then we're going to get really stuck on the Arabic. So it's just to give you that sense of what these actually mean. So an ism, which a lot of people think is a noun. It's not. It's not just a noun. It's also a pronoun. It's also an adjective, and it's also an adverb. And that becomes important because the grammatical analysis of an ism will incorporate all these four things, not separated out. So
in English, it's just a noun. That's the noun.
it's just a noun, yeah.
But
So
it can be spelled into ism, because ism has 4 different categories.
it's much more complex, the Arabic language, and
Yeah.
that complexity gives you a whole richness that is just not there in English. It's just simply not there. And you'll get to even appreciate that more when it comes to the verbs. It's a science in itself that you could spend years and years studying just on verbs alone, of how the morphology works. That's why morphology of the words is a science in itself. Yeah, and you cannot understand Arabic language without understanding the words, because they have so many different meanings and ways of describing them. So fast, the verb in English, but fast in Arabic will have so many different words meaning fast, because of depending on the context of where it's used. But I'll give you just hold that thought, put it in your mind, but don't try to analyze it, because we're going to show it to you exactly what that means. But just get that sense of appreciation that there is a lot of richness within one word. Okay? So great. So we talked about the kalima. So we talked about the isms.
Yeah.
So the kalima has 3 types. So the isms, the fi'l, and the harf. Okay. So what is a fi'l? What's a fi'l? If you give me a definition, fi'l basically means verb. So what would you? There's two features of a verb that you need to know. So noun is entity, place thing or person. A verb has 2 characteristics in terms of defining it that you just need to know. Can anyone remember what they were? Action plus tense.
Action plus?
Action plus tense. So, for example, an action can be, sujood is an action, yeah? But on its own, it's not a verb, sujood. It's an action, it's described, playing, right? So playing is not, or games, yeah? So let's stick with sujood, yeah? It's an action, but it's not a verb. To prostrate, yeah? I am prostrating is then becomes the verb. Yeah, so it's action plus the tense, right? So, walk, right, is an action. It's about walking, right? So to walk, yeah, to have a walk, yeah. So walk on its own is an action, but it's not a verb. But if you say I walked, in the past, or I am walking now, or I will walk, then the walk becomes a verb. So it's the action So the word has a meaning of action plus the tense, which can be either past, present, or future. That's really important to grasp those things. And that's what differentiates it from the noun. Because the noun will describe an entity, whereas the verb will describe an action, but have it in a tense. Yeah, so it's doing something in the past, present, or future. Alright? That is your fi'l. Yeah? So it's action, it has a meaning of action, plus a tense that goes with it. Alright? So another example will be entry. Yeah, so entry is an action of, you know, somebody of an entrance to where an entry point, but it's not a verb until I say I enter, or I did enter, or I have entered, or I will enter. Then that becomes a verb. Yeah. So once it attaches to a tense. Alright? So that's your fi'l. And then, can anyone remember harf? What are they? What are they?
Isn't it we actually stop at the ism? Did we do harf? Because I don't remember actually.
We touched upon it very quickly, but what we said was, if you remember, is that with the ism and fi'l, both of those have a meaning in the word itself.
Harf
So
is just like no meaning itself? Or
in itself it has no meaning, but it's when it's connected
combined.
with other words, i.e. isms or fi'l, then it makes a meaning. So for example, in doesn't have any meaning by itself, in, except when you say Zahid came in his house, then it has a meaning, right? So it connects words together, yeah, and it creates a meaning. But by itself, in means nothing. If you have in, what do you mean by in? Yeah, unless you say something is in something else, yeah. So these are things like prepositions, particles. So they're small things. So like in, on, at, from, or conjunctions, which mean to put things together. So and, or, okay. So these are all particles, yeah, okay. So these are these tiny things, or that, okay. So these are all small features, okay, and we'll see lots of examples of this.
So you're saying these are the verbs?
Yes.
So is, am, are, and things like that?
Not am, because am is a pronoun.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
abbreviates to a human being. So it's got to be like, so in doesn't abbreviate to anything. It's a connection between two words, either two isms, or an ism and a verb, or two verbs. So an ism and a verb will be Zahid ran in the house. So you've got the verb ran and house, yeah, as the noun. Or you can have Zayd and Amr. Zayd and Amr. So you've got two nouns together. Zayd and wa, and would be the harf in that. Yeah. So two isms. Okay. Or he ran and he ate. No. Or or he ate while he ran. Yeah. So you got two verbs, and while would be the the harf joining. But while on its own means what? Nothing.
So harf is means joining two things.
It's joining two things together, small particles.
so it's like by itself has no meaning, but when
Combined with others, yeah,
it
it
has a meaning.
Okay. So this is where we got up to. So that was right. That was from last lessons. Okay. Now we're going to start to get a little bit deeper. And where I want to actually go now is actually with the isms. Okay. I'm just going into a little bit more to explore them. All right. The nature of isms. Okay. So isms are actually created in three ways in the Arabic language. Where do they come from? How they come? There are three ways they come. And this is important because when it comes to the dictionary again, when you want to look up a noun, so isms three ways. The first is called jamid, and I'll explain what that means. Jamid in the literal sense means frozen or stuck. And jamid is really where the Arabic people just name something what it is. So, for example, they said that a man is called Rajul. Yeah? Rajul. Okay? They coined a man as a Rajul. Or a tree as Shajara. Okay? Or a boy as Walid. Yeah? Okay? So they gave it a meaning. Yeah? So and so if you want to look in the dictionary, you will simply look up, if you want to look up for man, you will look under Rajul. Ra, Jim and La. Rajul. Okay? So these are things that have no other source except what was just, they were named, they were called that. Yeah? It's like you think, okay, let's create a different word, our own language, and we'll call a book Ratan. That's what we'll call it. We've created our own language, the Siddiqui language. Okay, that's my surname. And I'll call that Ratan. I just wanted to call it, I think that looks like a Ratan. So that's in my language, I will call it Ratan. So same in Arabic, yeah? So these are jam. These are things that Arabic people have just described it as this. They've called this thing this. Okay, so they call a house a bayt.
Right.
Yeah, if that's what it is. There's no other root meaning except bayt. So that's the jam. Okay, and it's simply just finding those 3 letters in the dictionary and then you'll get the meaning.
So it does not have any root.
There's no root. Well, the root, yeah, there's no root. It's that's what it is, Rajul. So you'd have the Ra, Jim and La would be its root, 3 letters, you could say. Okay? But from it, there's no other words that are created from it. Right? Okay? So you'll understand when I come to the second, which is called the masdar.
Yeah. I remember this now. Jamad Masdar Mushtaq.
Mushtaq, yes, that's right.
Long time ago.
Look, you know, there's a lot of terminology, but you know, I want you to get into the habit of mushtaq. Mushtaq.
Mushtaq.
So mushtaq. Mushtaq. I want you to get used to these ideas. It's just useful to get a feeling for the words, okay? So the masdar is basically, these are, so what the Arabic linguistics grammarians did was that they looked at different words, and so they tried to get to their original source, okay? So, for example, and these let me define this. Masdar is basically, in English, what they call a verbal noun. Okay. It's also described as the infinitive. Okay. These are just terms that you don't necessarily have to understand deeply what it is. I think verbal noun is probably the best. And remember what I said is that a verb has an action plus tense. Yeah. So a verbal noun would be something that just has the action, but not the tense. So, for example, a verbal noun would be to eat. That is a verbal noun, to eat. Akal. Yeah? So it would be go. Yeah? Akal. Which is to eat. Yeah? Now, if we want to say he eats, then that becomes an action, and it's akala. Yeah? So this is the verbal noun, akal. Yeah? And so to eat, in one sense, it just describes an action. So like entrance would be a verbal noun, for example. To eat, to sit, to read. Not to read, because in English that means that you are reading. But yeah, the sitting, reading, eating. Yeah. So these are what they call verbal nouns. Yeah. From these verbal nouns comes the mushtaq. So if we take, for example, katab. Katab, which means to write. So a mushtaq from that would be maktab, which means desk, or desk or place where you, or maktaba, library of books. Right? So these are nouns that are coming out from the mushtaq. Or katib, which means the writer. Or kataba, he writes. Yeah? Okay? So you can see there's lots of words. So what the Arabic scholars did is that they saw maktab, they saw kataba, they saw katib. They said, what does it boil down to in terms of its root letters? What are the root letters of all these words? Yeah? And they found that actually katab is the root of all of these. So from maktab is to katab, kataba to katab, yeah? So they said, so this must be the root, the masdar. So we'll say katab means writing or to write, the verbal noun, okay? And all of these other words spring out of it, okay? So the mushtaq is really a derivation or patterns that come out of the masdar. Right. Now, a lot of these are actually from the mushtaq are actually verbs. Okay, few are nouns. Most of the nouns come from the jamid, like rajul. Yeah, you can't. There's no verb. There's no verbal noun for man or tree. Yeah, these are names that they pick. There's nothing that's formulated from it. Yeah, okay. But for the verbal nouns, there are all these different words. Yeah. So katib is a noun. It means writer. Yeah, so he is the writer. So you're describing, so it becomes a noun, a writer, or active participle, writer. Okay? But it comes from the verbal noun, the root katab, to write. And these are how isms are formed. And you can say for the verbs, you can say, and same principle for the verb, that you won't have a jamid, but you'll have a mustard and a mushtaq for the verbs. But for the nouns, you have to add in the jamid. Yeah? Where people coined things and said, this is what this means, and we'll call it that. Okay?
Can we have one full sentence to describe all these three types?
One full sentence, as in like...
a sentence which describes jamid, masdar and mushtaq all together.
I mean, just like if I say,
yeah. Yes.
He is very tall boy. So he is pronoun, right?
Yeah.
Very is maybe adjective, and tall is adverb, and boy is a noun. So just like a whole complete of this one.
So, yeah.
So can be done. Or
Which describes this a little bit more, because I'm still struggling to understand.
Yeah. So, okay, let's try and think of a... you can say, for example, the tall boy is a good runner. Okay. But the thing is, it could be any of those. So boy is walid, tall is tawil. Okay. So these are words that you could say are jamid. They will just talk. Tall means they just call it tawil. Yeah. And they say boy is walid. Okay. So these are actually jamid. The one that actually is mushtaq is the runner. Okay, because it means it comes from the verbal noun to run. Okay, but the thing is, you don't need to work this out. This is just to give you an appreciation. How do isms come about? How are they created? So it's not about you trying to then see a sentence and think, oh, which one is jamid? No, it's just to give you appreciation. How do these words come? So some come from the original. And some are derived. That's all you need to know. So things like katib are derived from katab.
Okay.
That's the only appreciation that you should, in very simplistic terms. Okay? So if you wanted to actually find, or maktab, let's take maktab. If you want to know the meaning of maktab, you know it's the jamid. It comes from the masdar katab. So you'd have to go to the dictionary and look up katab to find out what maktab means.
Yeah.
Alright? If you can't go to mean, kaf, yeah, because it's a mushtaq. Its root is actually the verbal noun katab. Whereas for rajul, you go straight to it because it's a jamid. Yeah? So it just gives you an impression. Those are derived and those are not derived.
Okay.
Let's put it this way.
Sense.
And the derived come from have a masdar plus a mushtaq together. Mustard. So mustards always have mushtaqs coming out of it.
Yeah.
Derivations coming because mustard means source. So if it's a source of something else, isn't it? That's come out of it. So those inherently come together. You'll never get a masdar alone.
so the qatab is a masdar and muktab is a mushtaq? Or the
Yes.
Yes.
Katab would be the masdar, and katib or maktab would be the mushtaq. Okay. So we're going to nearly wrap up now, inshallah. So this is for the ism. Okay, so we've understood that it's really derived from three ways. Okay, now the very last thing that we're going to do, okay, in the last few minutes, we already touched upon it a little bit, but we'll just touch upon it one more time, is the harf, okay, the particles, alright? Now with harf, how do they divide? They divide into amil and غير amil.
Amr and where?
غير amil.
Rebel.
غير without.
Oh,
It's also called mamun or something as well.
Or amil.
Amil and mamun. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well,
Mamu is something else.
amil means agent, okay, and غير amil means non-agent.
Yeah.
Alright? What it's basically saying here, and this is really good, what we'll then discuss in the next lesson, inshallah, is that these are called governing agents. Right? And what that basically means is that they alter the word that goes after it. Right? Okay, so just bear with me. Okay? So some will and some won't. Okay, so let me give you an example of where it doesn't. Zaydun wa Amrun. Okay? So if I write that out, so this is an example here. If I have Zaydun wa and then Amarun, okay? So you can say that both are not affected, yeah? So that both are supposed to have dhamma, okay? So there's no effect with the wa. It doesn't affect the actual ending of the vowels, okay? However, if I said if we go to, so if I say go to Zayd, okay, I have to say, so, or he went to Zayd, so it would be ذهب إلى زيد, not Zaydun, Zaydin. Alright, so let me try and explain that a bit better. So ila, so if I just write that full sentence out, so ذهب, I think it's a ha. He went. Now ila is the harf, yeah, okay, and so he went to Zayd, okay, so that's in English. He went to Zayd, yeah. If I want to say that in Arabic, I don't go ذهب إلى زيد, I go ذهب إلى زيد. So the Zaydun goes to Zaydin because of ila. So this is what it's trying to say, that harf have two situations. Yes, they connect two words together, but what they do is that they can sometimes alter the end vowels of the word. Okay? So in the other time we had Zaydun wa being the wa, which is the harf,
Yeah.
but that's gayra amil. So it's not Zaydun wa Amran or Amrin, it's Amrun. It's the same, it doesn't change its ending. But ila does. And so ila is an amil, it's a governing agent. It will change the meaning of what comes after it. Alright?
Okay.
So why does it change? What's the significance? How does it change? If we say ila, why don't? Does it make no sense?
It will make no sense.
Oh.
Exactly. And remember what we said is that the meanings in the Arabic language come from the pronunciation at the end. Okay?
Okay.
So that's what I want you to hold on as the last point, okay? Is that this is what we're going to, and we'll continue this subject next time, but what you understand is that harf are amil and ghayru amil, okay? And that the amil, the governing agent, actually affects the pronunciation of the word that comes after it. So Zaydun goes to Zaydin, okay? So we're going to talk much more about what these endings are in the isms, but I want you to just appreciate that there is this thing happening, okay?
Okay.
Alright, so in summary, we talked today, we broke down the isms, okay, into our noun, adjectives, adverbs and pronouns. We talked about the source of the isms, which can be jamid, okay, masdar, and through the masdar comes the mushtaq, okay, and then we've talked about harfs, which are particles, they have no meaning in themselves, but they connect words together. And that there are amil, those when they connect the words, but they alter the endings of the noun that comes after it, or the verb. And those that are ghayru amil, which don't alter the meaning, like wa, for example.
Okay.
So we'll hold with that thought and we'll continue next. Hold with that.